Today, let's take a look at Ilford Delta 100. I wanted to do some more film comparisons to Tri-X like I began earlier in the year. But to keep things consistent, rather than do them every now and then, I went ahead and got 49 different film stocks. Everything I could get in 35mm from B&H and Freestyle. So unless they were out of stock, I got a roll of it. Now, if this part of the video seems familiar, it's because I'm using this portion of the video for all 49 of them rather than record it 49 times. So if you want to skip ahead to the H&D curves or the prints, time codes are right over here. For those of you that haven't seen this part of the video before, here's what I've done. So I wanted to use each film with the exact same shot, which is a headshot of me with a Kodak Gray Card Plus, which happens to have a red, blue, and green patch, a cyan, magenta, yellow patch, and then a dark and a neutral flesh tone. Then, with those shots taken, I bracketed every shot in third of a stop so that we can make sure we have a negative of equal shadow density to the base target film of Tri-X. Now, the reason I use Tri-X is because it's just been around for a long time and it's a very popular film. So it's a good base film to compare everything to. Then, once everything was developed, which was developed in D-76 at stock for the manufacturer's recommended time, I printed everything on Ilford using the exact same aperture, contrast settings, developer, and everything. The only thing I changed was my exposure time, and that was to make sure that I compensated for any base fog variation from one film stock to another. Other than that, everything was left the same so that we can have a comparison of just the qualities of the film. Now, there's going to be some differences in contrast, especially on the high end, and that's because the manufacturers getting their development time may not have used the same target that Kodak used for Tri-X. And that's okay. We're not looking at the overall contrast for everything. What we're really looking at is grain characteristics, tonality, how the film treats the shadows versus the highlights, that sort of thing. And we're looking at spectral sensitivity, thus the Gray Card Plus, rather than just a regular Gray Card. So we're going to go ahead and look at H&D curves, which if you saw one of my earlier videos on sensitometry, I like to use pen and paper and make my graphs. However, my wife was really ready to make sure I was done with this project. So she put everything into a spreadsheet for you all. So even though I don't like them, I want to show them to you thanks to her. Then we're going to go ahead and look at the prints side by side with the same print made from Tri-X. And from there, you can decide if you like the film and if you want to go and use it. So let's go ahead and take a look at the curves, and then we'll go to the prints. Here we have Tri-X in blue, Delta 100 from Ilford in red. Now we can see clearly that the graph is much higher in red than the blue. Mostly this is because I feel like the time provided for D-76 stock was way too high. Agitation was the same, temperature was the same, but we've got much brighter highlights, and that's going to be bear out in the prints once we get there. But overall, we have a smooth toe. I do not find it to be the immediate jump in density that we saw in the T-Max 100 film, but it is a fairly good straight line. It does dip a bit in the highlights, the upper, mid, lower highlights, and then it takes that same kind of trajectory upward in the upper highlights. But overall, the line, it's pretty good. So nice and smooth for the most part, a little bumpy here and there. What I think this is going to show is that good lower and middle separation, a little flat in the lower highlights where we probably won't see as much separation of values as we would otherwise. So let's look at the prints and see what it actually does. Here we have our Tri-X and our Delta 100. Obviously, we can see immediately highlights are way bright over here on the Delta 100. So the development time is just off. I went back through all of my notes to make sure I didn't somehow screw this up and develop it at the wrong time. And from everything I can tell, I didn't. So this is the development time in stock D-76 as recommended by Ilford. But it's just way too long, so it really toasted the highlights. It is a 100 speed film. I got full film speed out of that, but the time is just off, which is weird because all the other development times from Ilford for Ilford were correct. So for some reason, this one just did not come out as anticipated. That being said, it's still a pretty good film overall. So clearly we can overdevelop and get what we need from it. The film does have detail in these areas. So if you're looking for a film that can handle some nice plus development, this film will do it for you. Spectral response. We are nice and even all the way down. We are a touch dark on the darker flesh tone, but technically we are just a touch dark on the darker flesh tone over here as well. So I'm getting pretty much the exact same response. Same shadow detail and everything like that. So really we're just getting that really crispy highlight from some overdevelopment. So let's go ahead and zoom in there, take a peek at the grain and detail to see what kind of particulars we are getting. Now, it's going to be hard, before we get in there, it's going to be hard for us to really get a sense of how this brand treats the separation of highlights as opposed to Tri-X. So unfortunately, we're not going to get quite the even comparison that I would like to get, but since this whole thing is keeping our variables controlled by using exactly the time recommended from the manufacturer and not changing from that, we're going to get a little bit too bright of a highlight. Now, we can see how the upper mid-tones separate when we get down into this area, but I'm afraid our highlights, because they did print fairly blank, being just too bright, we're not going to get that really good look, particularly up in this area where I'd like to see it. All right, let's go ahead and zoom in. All right, here we are with the first section, and we can see right away that the smooth background does have finer grain, which we would certainly hope for a film to stop slower. It is nice and smooth. We can see some of the detail in the texture under my eye on the shaded side, that we are getting nice, crisp detail there. We're going to see some of that later on with the other sections, but straight ahead we can go ahead and see like the eyebrow, the forehead, things like that. Definitely nice and sharp. Here with the shoulder, we can see we are picking up the nice detail of the fuzzy edge of my silhouetted shoulder against the background. We can get a really good view of the smooth tonality of the background, and we can see the separation in the shadow, the shaded areas of those midtones. It's pretty similar actually. So we're getting in the folds of the shirt on that shoulder really kind of the same sort of shadow separation between the two. So that's nice to see. Okay, so here on this side, it is a little bit harder to compare because we're starting to get blown highlights on that lit shoulder. We can still see some nice sharp detail in the collar ribbing of the shirt and the texture of the skin on my neck. So we definitely are getting nice sharp detail. We just unfortunately losing a lot of detail in the brightest highlights from just being overdeveloped. So it would have been nice to have a little bit more direct comparison. Unfortunately, we're not going to get that. But I guess if you want to see mid-tone separation, you can start to see that in the skin on my neck, how the mid-tones are separating compared to the Tri-X. And finally, the section of the lighted side of my face. We can still see some texture in the pockets of mid and shadow tone around the eye, the eyebrow, the hair. So we are getting nice sharp detail. We are getting everything we would expect from a panchromatic film, nice and sharp. But you know, we're talking one of the two major manufacturers in the world, so clearly we would expect these kinds of results. I think we're getting exactly what we anticipate. We just need to modify the developing time to better match the film than what we got. Other than that, a very, very good performance. Unfortunately, we can't directly compare highlight separation since we lost pretty much all of our highlights with that too long developing time. So slightly disappointing result there from processing the film. But quite frankly, having used this film before, I don't really think there's anything to be disappointed with in this film. You're going to get pretty much what you anticipate. So overall, great performance. Okay, so thank you all for watching. If you'd like to help support this channel, you can go to my Patreon page, you can go to my merchandise page. Those things do help support this channel and purchase films and developers for these comparisons. The support you give just helps me make more videos for you. Thanks again for watching. We will see you next time.